Hello, viewers. My name is Sam Costello,
And I'm Dion Figueroa.
and we're here to discuss a young adult literature book that we read by Sherman Alexie titled
The absolutely true story of a part-time Indian. So the whole purpose of this assignment was to pick a book that related to a social justice topic. The social justice topic that we picked was integration and how that relates to Native American students as they try to integrate into majority white schools.
The book by Sherman Alexie is really about him being a Spokane Indian boy who breaks away from the Indian reservation and its stigmas of life in an endless cycle of oppression and alcoholism, crosses the racial boundary into the white man's world and its superfluities as he attends a high school in a rich white farm town looking for hope of breaking that cycle.
Now, before we get into our review, we do have to note that the author, Sherman Alexie, has been accused and has self-admitted to being a perpetrator of sexual harassment and sexual assault. Now, although none of those topics are very relevant in the novel, we felt that it had to be noted as it really taints the credibility of the author. So instead of doing a traditional review, since this is a vlog, Sam and I decided that we would pick out 2 to 3 things that we found that stood out within the book and just talk about those. So one thing that I really liked about this book was that it brought up a variety of topics and themes. It really addresses everything from racism to sexism to mental illness, and for the most part, I felt that it covered all of those pretty sensitively and in a very respectable manner. I don't know if the revelation about his past at the end of the book really did it for me personally. It felt as if 98% of the book is about topics of self-hatred and crisis and self-identity, and that never really gets resolved by the end of the book.
And the part that I pointed out that was kind of resonated with me is he had a teacher called Mr. P, and Mr. P gave a confession of the true reason why schools were placed on the reservations. And those schools were placed on the reservations to change the Indian culture to the white man's culture and trying to erase their existence within those communities. In the book, they also talked about that the reservation was pretty much a jail system set up to remove the Indian from their nomadic ways of doing things. But this has deep resonance into the past of American dealings with Indian affairs and broken promises for over 200 years.
There was a passage in the book that stood out to me. It's when his teacher, Mr. P, is first telling Arnold, the main character of the book, to leave the reservation. And the passage goes like this. When I first started teaching here, that's what we did to the rowdy ones, And talking about the rowdy ones, he's speaking about Native Americans. He says, we beat them. That's how we were taught to teach you. We were supposed to kill the Indian to save the child. I didn't literally kill Indians. We were supposed to make you give up being Indian. Your songs, stories, language, and dancing. Everything. We weren't trying to kill Indian people. We were trying to kill Indian culture. And that's found on page 35 in the book. Going into the second thing that I really enjoyed about the novel was the characterization. Alexie's characterization of everyone from Arnold's childhood friend Rowdy to Arnold's grandmother to Arnold's new white friend Gordy is authentic and believable. It's written as a fictional story, but the way that all the characters are fleshed out, I wouldn't hesitate for a moment to believe that these are all real people.
And even Gordy dropped some knowledge at points in the novel in trying to comfort Arnold about his preferences and expressing meaning through drawing rather than writing. Gordy tells him, if you're good at it and it helps you to navigate the river of the world, then what's wrong with it? And that could be found on page 95. Something else that resonated with me in the book was Sherman's Alexie nuances and other genres with his writing. Tears of the Clown was a song recorded by Smokey Robinson. Stranger in a Strange Land was a novel written by Robert A. Heinlein. Sad Sack, an American comic strip created by Sergeant George Baker. And Captain Obvious was a commercial for Hotels.com reservation company. I thought these were really neat how he pulled stuff from the past and the future into his writing in different genres.
Going into the third thing that Sam and I both found stood out in the novel was the general humor of it. The story is dark, but it's funny as Alexie pulls the reader into his narrative and begins to answer questions that the reader has, but subconsciously.
He makes you laugh out loud, but in the same breath or page fills your heart with so much sadness, and the last 6 chapters pour out pain. The story ends with a happy note, with Rowdy and Junior reconciling their relationship, or so it seems.
And Sam and I both felt that the humor is generally what helps to make the book readable, as listing out all of the events in the book outside of the context of the book itself just gets really dark.
Very dark.
And lastly, we're going to go into how this book addresses some of the social justice commentaries that we were looking at.
We saw racial divide and tension between whites and Native Americans.
It dealt with a lot of institutional racism.
Profiling. Police profile Indians just as they profile African Americans in a different part of our nation. And also, he had an acronym called DWI, and it's not what you think. It's Driving While Indian. Puts a humorous spin on a malignant problem.
And students in the school profile Indians as subhuman and make their mascot into their resemblance of Indian facial features, the hook nose syndrome, and very stereotypical. And there's a moment in the book where Arnold sits down next to the statue of the school mascot, which is an Indian, and realizes that it looks nothing like him.
Nothing like him. Another social justice issue is alcoholism on the reservation, and how alcoholism is prevalent in everything within this book, and it destroys everything within this book. And it's not just on the reservation, it also affects America nationwide, the effects of alcoholism.
The last major theme that this book deals with is interpersonal racism and the effects that it has on the children themselves. Throughout the book, Arnold speaks very negatively about his own culture, and it definitely resonates a lot of self-hate, self-resentment, and it's caused a lot of identity issues for him, especially when it comes to different social situations, whether it's being confronted with dating, whether it's being confronted with his own socioeconomic class. And he also has very harsh descriptions of his family's alcohol abuse, and he doesn't tend to give a lot of cultural background as to the root of these causes. And it turns into a lot of victim blaming.
If Sherman Alexie gave you a little bit of background knowledge into the alcoholism issue on Native Americans, it could put a little bit more context to this book, and not thinking that these people aren't trying to get out of it. It's something that culturally has been placed to them by white man for over 200 years, and not 200 years. Well, probably 200 years with trading and stuff. So there's a lot of background that goes with that, and it's unfortunate that that's not really pointed out in the book.
Yeah, and I feel that mirrors our overall final representation of how we feel about the book, as in it presents a lot of complex problems, but doesn't necessarily confront them well enough, or doesn't necessarily present a plan of action to combat them.
Yeah, a resolution that would be nice.
And that's our review of The Absolutely True Story of a Part-Time Indian by Sherman Alexie.
Thank you for watching our readers. We appreciate your posts, your texts. We appreciate all the stars you give us, and keep them coming. And we'll be seeing you next time. Ciao.
All right. Good. All right, let's see.